So, some of my memories of my days here at Westminster, I can remember my first preaching course with Dr. Clowney, and I prepared on Luke 10, the parable of the Good Samaritan, and I thought that I, uh, I expected revival to break out in the classroom when I preached that. And after I finished preaching the sermon, Dr. Clowney kind of shuffled forward, looked a little hesitant, and I remember he said to the class, "I think the one thing I can say about Mr. Harris's sermon was it was sincerely delivered." And I knew that I was in trouble, and he gently tore it piece to piece. But I learned a lot, and learned a lot about preaching. I remember the days with John Murray. When I was a student here, I came from a non-Christian background, hadn't been a Christian very long. I didn't know the difference between an Arminian and an Armenian. And so when I went to Mr. Murray's classes, it was all new. And he would open up the scriptures, and almost every class I would work my way forward to talk to him with a lot of questions about what he had to say, especially since my roommate was trying to get me to speak in tongues. So we would sit there together, and one day after I came forward, it was maybe the 20th time or so, and he said, Mr. Harris, when I see you come forward, I just sit down because I know I'm not going anywhere for a long, long time. He was so patient with me. I learned a lot, so much of it that was with the times with him personally afterwards. I remember the first time I saw Harvey Kahn was a day of prayer. He had just come back from Korea. It looked like he just got off the boat. His hair wasn't combed. He had these big, thick glasses and carrot red hair. And he really was somewhat bizarre looking. And I kind of laughed when I saw him. I just smiled thinking, wow, this guy's really strange looking. And I remember that 20 minutes into his message, I totally forgot anything about what he looked at. He was lifting up Christ in Luke's theology of prayer, and it just captivated me. And I hoped that I would get to know him, and by God's grace and mercy, we did become good friends, and I was able to spend a lot of time with him. Learned a lot about expanding my understanding of the kingdom. It was just a wonderful thing. I remember one time, the professors were pretty intense here, and one time I was passing the classroom buildings, now called the carriage house, and we had classes in there, and I noticed some smoke coming out of the second floor, and went up and found out the second floor was on fire. The classroom building was on fire, so I went downstairs to the class that was meeting there, and I said to the professor, "You might want to consider ending the class a little early today because the classroom building's on fire." Well, I don't think he heard me. He was so wrapped up in his lecture, but I know the students heard me because they started looking a little nervous. So 5 minutes later, we called the fire department and was waiting for the fire engines, and they hadn't been there yet, and the smoke's billowing more and more and starting to really get kind of animated. And so I went back inside the classroom building again, and I said, "Sir, I really think you ought to consider ending the class early today because the second floor is really on fire." And at that point, he still was hesitating what to do, and the class immediately vacated, so I guess he thought, I don't have a class, so I might as well just stop and finish the day. A lot of great memories of this place.